Good morning, this is Kris Shoemaker, also known as Yehudah ben Shomeyr, and you're listening to Coffee with Kris, the time of the day where we share a cup of coffee and share a bit of the Word of God. Thank you so much for joining me on this Friday morning for a hot cup of coffee and a hot cup of the Word of God. We're rounding out our week and rounding out our Torah portion. This is the Friday-Saturday portion of Vayichi, which means he lived, and our Sidra for today is Genesis chapter 49, verse 27, all the way to chapter 50, verse 26. It takes us to the end of Genesis, and when we end a book of Torah, we traditionally say chazak, chazak, vitnitz chazak, which means be strong, and let us be strengthened. So today's reading, I want to go to Genesis chapter 50 and start at verse 24. It says, Joseph said to his brothers, I am dying, but God will surely remember you and bring you up out of this land to a land which he swore to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then Joseph took an oath from the sons of Israel. God will surely remember you, and you are to carry my bones up from here. So Joseph died at the age of 110, and they embalmed him and put him in a coffin in Egypt. Now remember, the same thing happened with his father Jacob. His father Jacob was embalmed. Why was he embalmed? Well, because Joseph had the power to do that, but because of a promise that Joseph made to Jacob when Jacob said, promise me you will bury me in Canaan. You will bury me in the cave of Machpelah with my ancestors. That's a long journey in desert, inclement weather, and if a body is not preserved, it's going to rot, it's going to stink, and it's going to be a miserable journey, and it'll just be gross. So Jacob was embalmed so his body can endure the journey from Egypt to the cave of Machpelah so he could have a proper burial. So, in anticipation of God's promise to Abraham, when the covenant between the parts says, you know what, your descendants will be strangers in the land for hundreds of years, but I will remember them and I will bring them back to this land, but you will die at a good old age. And then God reiterated that same promise to Jacob, says, don't be afraid to go down to Egypt because I'm going to bring you and your descendants back up from here. And Joseph carries on that promise of God and that tradition by saying, you know what, you're going to be here for a while. You're going to probably be here for about 200 to 400 years, depending on which scholar you follow. But when you do, take me with you. Don't let my body be buried and stay in Egypt. I want to be buried with my ancestors as well. So therefore, Joseph, in anticipation of God fulfilling his word and fulfilling his promise, he was embalmed too. So he says, then Joseph took an oath from the sons of Israel. God will surely remember you, and you are to carry my bones up from here. He was that confident that he made preparations for the future. So Joseph died at 110, and he was embalmed, or they embalmed him, which meant his body was going to be preserved so it wouldn't stink and last the journey when the Exodus did occur, and they took Joseph's bones with them. They embalmed him and put him in a coffin in Egypt. So that's basically saying to us that we need to be prepared for the fulfillment of God's promises in our lives. God promised Noah that it would rain. What did he do? Sit around and twiddle his thumbs? No, he built an ark. No, he brought in food. No, he brought in the animals in anticipation. So whenever you know that something is going to happen, prepare. In other words, prepare like Noah, stand like Daniel, and expect to be provided for like Elijah. So Daniel stood in times of persecution, and Elijah, was provided for when he had to go on the run and couldn't take any provisions with him. He didn't have the ability to prepare ahead of time. So sometimes we might find ourselves in a situation like that. And if we do, we know that God will provide. But if we know ahead of time, it behooves us to make preparations and not lollygag and then expect God to, come in with a Hail Mary and save us when we did not prepare when we were supposed to and like we could. Guys, thanks so much for listening. Go out there and have a great day. Shalom and God bless.